Hey, science peeps, welcome to another installment of my walkthroughs. Today, we are going to be starting chapter 6. So, if you're in my period 2, 3, and 5, 6 class, um, you're doing this on June 5th. This is the last chapter that we're going to be doing before we move on to our final project. And if you're in my 8, 9 class, you'll be doing this on June 8th. Okay, so let's get started. Couple ways again that you can look at this. You can use your um, virtual classroom, or you can go to the HyperDoc. So I'll show you both ways as usual. When you go to your Google Classroom, make sure that it says the June 5th through June 10th activities. Right now, this does say period 2, 3, and 5, 6 because I don't want to get the classes confused because we're switching. My day 1 classes are moving on to chapter 6. My day 2 classes are still on chapter 4, so I labeled it this way. But by June 8th, when period 8, 9 does this, it'll just say June 5th to June 10th. All right, so just look for June 5th through June 10th. Okay, so click on that. Now here is the HyperDoc, and then you would look for your classroom and for the date. Okay, so this was the one that we had clicked on. So today's activities are going to be to watch this walkthrough. We're going to complete a bunch of activities today. We're going to be learning about Charles Darwin and natural selection. The Google Doc is located in Google Classroom. Then we're going to watch 2 short videos. You're going to watch one called Why Don't Humans Ride Zebras? And then you're going to answer a question on the second page of the doc. And then you're going to watch another video, actually 2 more videos, video 2 and video 3. They're all on the bookshelf up here on natural selection. And there's one last question to answer on the second page of the um, doc. Okay, and I have some new pictures up here. You can click on these if you're interested. All the hyperlinks, all these little pictures, the poster, the bird. Oh wow, why does that hermit crab have a line through it? What is that saying? There's a plant, a plant, a plant. Some interesting plant facts there. I got a dog and a cat and me. Okay, so let's get started. Let me show you the hyperdoc for today. Let's go back to, I have way too many windows open, Miss CJ. All right, so here's our hyperdoc. And again, this is separated by date. So 2, 3, and 5, 6, you'll be doing this on June 5th. Period 8, 9, you're doing it on June 8th. Here's the walkthrough. These are the activities you're completing. And video, answer the questions in your doc. Watch these 2 videos and then answer the last question in your doc. Okay. And then for the next day, for June 8th, which is Monday, or Tuesday, June 9th, you'll be doing another Legends of Learning where you pick 2 of the 3. Okay, pick 2 of the 3 games. They'll be up. All the other Legends of Learning activities are going to be down after that. Okay, just so I can make room for these because I can only put up 3 at a time. And then you have the next day a vocab quiz using, you're going to complete the Quizlet activities to prepare for your quiz. Make sure you complete flashcards, learn, write, test, and match. Here is the link. And then after that is your quiz on a Google form on the next day. Okay. And then that's going to close out chapter 6, and you'll be doing your end of the unit project, which is a test grade after that. Okay. And I'll have a walkthrough all ready for you for that. Okay. So let's get to it. We're going to be going back to our Google Classroom. Hover over where it says chapter 6, lesson 1 workbook activities. Okay, so we have a few to do. Then here at the bottom are your questions. After you watch the first video, it says, what are 2 reasons why some animals were easier to domesticate than others? And then After you watch the other two videos, you're going to write 2 sentences on how or why species have changed over time due to natural selection. So, what is natural selection? Very good question. Okay, let's do our workbook activities. So, we're starting with figure 2. Okay, let me give you a little background on Charles Darwin. He was, I think it's back here. Okay. So Charles Darwin, he published a book called The Voyage of the Beagle. He um, sails on a ship that he called the Beagle. Okay. And he wanted to learn about animals. He was really interested in just animals and how they change. And he believed in evolution. So he went to the Galapagos Islands. And on these islands are separate from the continent that they're next to. And he found that there were similar animals, but they were also really different from the animals that lived on the continent. Um, and he studied them and he discovered that they had to adapt. These birds that had flown, these finches, um, they had changed. Um, there are all different reasons why these birds might have gotten to the island because it was pretty far away from the continent, from the mainland. And it could be that winds had blown them over to the island over time at different times, where they were on ships and hitched rides on ships. And then when it came close to these islands, they kind of flew because they saw land. But all of these finches that existed on the mainland miles and miles away. They existed in the Galapagos Islands, but they looked really similar, like I said, and different. So they had to adapt to different kinds of food. So we're going to talk about these finches. There's actually an activity where you're going to see this. All right. So let's get to our first question. All right. So here we have two iguanas. Okay. One is like dark and has purple in it. That's pretty, and some white. Okay. And then one that's pretty much green and with a little bit of white. So it says, let me get that picture of that iguanas in here. They're cute. All right. So it says the iguanas on the Galapagos Islands have large claws that allow them to grip slippery rocks so they can feed on seaweed. The iguanas on the mainland, so these are from the islands, these are from the mainland, have smaller claws that allow them to climb trees so they can eat leaves. Okay, so it says the color of each iguana is an adaptation to its what? So we'll think about where they live. Why would they be different colors? This green iguana lives in trees and eats leaves. What color are leaves? Green. Okay, so they're way up in those leaves. That green will camouflage them. And then these iguanas, the dark ones, they live on these dark rocks. And these dark rocks are also underwater. And seaweed, I know it's green, but it's like really, really dark green. So being a darker color is going to help them blend in. So why are they that color? It's because of their habitat. Okay. And it's so that they can blend into their environment. So let's go over to this. So we're going to say habitat. Now, the dark iguanas, they are ancestors, they're relatives of those green iguanas. So at some point, these iguanas, okay, swam over, maybe hitched a ride on a boat, like I said, and found their way to the Galapagos Islands. Over time, the ones that were darker survived. So see, it still has some dark patches, and there's variation, and we're gonna have that. We're gonna look up that word in a second. And so the ones that had more darker spots and splotches survived than the ones who were the really, really bright green. And then little by little, the color started getting darker and darker, and the darker iguanas mated with other darker iguanas, and it made them better suited for their environment. Okay, so the genes that had that dark color survived. The ones that had the brighter color, they got eaten pretty quickly. So the green gene didn't get passed on as much. And that's how you get that change over time. All right, next, here are those birds I was talking to you about. So, all of these birds, these finches, they came from the same basic stock. of finches. And over time, they became specialized, and different finches developed different kinds of beaks that you can see here. Okay, you see this is a long pointy beak, uh, short and rounded. That's a really bulky beak. Okay, used for probably crushing things. It looks really strong, and this is a more delicate kind of beak. Okay, so let's see here. It says in Figure 3, the structure of each bird's beak is an adaptation to the type of food the bird eats. Now, remember, there's variation in the population, just like there is with us. Some people are taller, shorter, okay, all different kinds of traits. So the birds that got swept to the islands has some variation in their beaks, and the ones that had maybe a bulkier beak, okay, ate a certain kind of food. I don't want to give away the answer yet, and they mated with each other because they were eating food in a similar area. So that's who you were going to mate with, the ones who were nearby. And then over time, they developed this bulkier beak. And the same thing with all the other ones. So the ones that had maybe a longer, sharper beak, a pointier beak to get certain kinds of food. It's called the cactus ground finch. So I guess you can kind of guess what kind of food they ate. They were more specialized. And over time, their beaks got a little bit longer and more specialized. Okay. So it says, look at the different beak structures, draw a line from each finch to the type of food you think it eats. So I know we can't draw lines, so we're just going to write the name of the finch and the kind of food it eats. So let's start with this one. This is pretty easy. Cactus ground finch. So is it going to eat bugs, berries, nuts, or the cactus? So it's good, the cactus, yeah. If you look at that beak, it's pointy, so it can get in between those thorns and get the flesh of the cactus. Okay, that made it easier for them. So cactus groundfinch ate cactuses. Okay. The next one is the small tree finch. Okay. You know what? Let's take a look at another one. How about the vegetarian tree finch? Oh, look, they're both tree finches. Okay. But this one says it's a vegetarian tree finch. This one says small tree finch. So, what kind of things are in trees? So, cactus is done. So, you can have nuts in trees. Okay. That's an awfully tiny beak for nuts, though. You need to have a really strong beak to crush nuts. I could crush nuts, maybe. But it says it's a vegetarian. Okay, so nuts are a plant. Um, and this is a small tree finch, but look at this guy. He has a really bulky beak. Okay, so this is a vegetarian finch. That kind of a beak. What do you think it's better at eating and crushing? Berries or nuts? If you take a look at the whole picture. And this one is going to be more for the berries. So the vegetarian tree finch ate berries. And then the other tree finch, small tree finch, well, what else do you have in trees? And look at that tiny beak. It can't really crush these bigger seeds. So the other thing that you find a lot in trees are insects. That's really good at plucking insects and just squishing them. So I know, yum. All right, so the small tree finch, we're going to say insects. And then finally, by process of elimination, we have this medium ground finch. So the way that they say it, I almost feel like it's a little bit larger than the small one. So it's going to eat larger foods. And that beak is like, it's like a muscle beak. So that beak is going to eat the seeds and the nuts. The medium ground finch, seeds and nuts. So let's move on to figure 4. Yeah. Okay, next. Let's see some words. Let's go over some vocabulary here because you're going to need to know this for the quiz. The process of change over time is called evolution. Darwin wanted to know how organisms change. So, over the next 20 years, he consulted with other scientists, gathered information, and he hypothesized that species change over many generations. So, it doesn't happen quickly, it happens over time, and they become better adapted to their new conditions. Um, so, we can have, dogs came from wolves, okay? They're a direct ancestor of wolves, but dogs are a lot different than wolves. Genetically, they look almost identical if you're going to look at their genetics, but we're just looking at how they look, their phenotype. Um, and what happens is, especially with the dog, once those first wolves came into human populations, humans started breeding them for specific purposes. Some dogs are really good at like seeing prey. Some dogs are really good at hearing like an intruder or even other animals trying to come in and hurt the people because they were hunting, just like we did. Some dogs were good at smelling. Okay. There was just something I saw on the news that a dog in Italy, it found this humongous truffle. They sniffed it out. And it was like worth, I don't know, like $1,000. This truffle, this like mushroom type fungus that people eat is really expensive. So that dog has a really good nose. So let's go on to the next page. That brings us to the term artificial selection. Okay. Artificial selection is when on purpose you try to bring out a certain kind of trait in animals, in plants, in like, well, we're not supposed to be it's supposed to be against the law to do this with people. It's kind of like those sci-fi movies where you genetically enhance or change like the baby. Okay. But we've done this, humans have done it with dogs, especially with cats, with birds. And you see these, and chickens, big with chickens, with cows. We have all different kinds of cows that came from one like wild kind of cow, and we bred them for certain things. And we have all different kinds of cows, domestic cows, I should say. So, anyway, these pigeons, okay, look how fancy this is. Like the general wild pigeon. Look at these fancy pigeons. That's crazy, these feathers. So people would breed them, the ones that had the fluffiest feathers, they would breed them and just continue to breed the fluffy feathered ones to get or fancy feathered ones to get I say chickens, pigeons that look like this. And the same thing with dogs. You breed them, you say, oh wow, that dog is really good at sniffing and smelling things out, and so is that one. So we're going to breed them, and hopefully they have pups that are good, really good at smelling. And then you just stick with that. And over time, we now have like so many different kind of breeds of dogs, and we're still doing that with dogs, making new breeds all the time. Now we have hypoallergenic dogs. So it says this is like an what would you do? Figure four. This like any answer will do. So if you were to breed an animal, what would it be and what traits would you want it to have? So I thought about this and I said, I have two chinchillas and they poop a lot. These little tiny creatures, I can't even imagine how this poop comes from these tiny little bodies. Um, and so I would breed a chinchilla that didn't poop so much, or that was like inherently it knew how to use a litter box, because it is crazy to clean them every day. All right. And I have to clean them every day because that's how much they poop. It's just amazing. I clean up their cage and like there's like 10 more poops. Like, where did that come from? It just came out of them all of a sudden. They're like Pez dispensers. All right. So that's what I would do. Enough of my problem. So don't write this down because I won't accept it. Any answer uh, within reason, because if it's totally off topic, I'm not going to accept it. But think about it. Have fun with that. All right, let's go to assess your understanding 1B and 1C. Assess your understanding. Yeah, don't get chinchillas unless you are okay with like cleaning poop every day. All right, assess your understanding 1B. An adaptation is a trait that increases an organism's ability to blank and blank. So the whole reason that organisms try to adapt and they're always trying to stay ahead of like nature, is because, well, they want to live. They want to survive, and then the whole point of surviving is to pass on, to continue your genetics, so that in a way it's almost like you're immortal. So the whole reason is to survive and then to pass on those genetics to reproduce. So that's what these two blanks are: survive and reproduce. Let's go to 1C. It says, how does artificial selection support Darwin's hypothesis? So, just like natural selection, which we're going to talk about in a second, artificial selection, okay, shows how organisms change over time. And so that's what Darwin saw with these with the finches and with the iguanas, that they made slow changes over time, over generations. So you can't just breed like two dogs and bam, you have like a hypoallergenic dog. It takes time and different kinds of breeding. So it shows how changes that occur in a species happen over many generations. So artificial happen over many generations. All right, moving along to figure 6. Let's see what kind of vocabulary we come up with. First, okay, here we go for natural selection. So, natural selection is a process that organisms adapt to their environment um, over time, and it just is a natural process. Okay, so it's not that humans are breeding two individuals because they're trying to get a certain trait. Is that you have organisms that are adapting to their environment for that reason, just like the moth, the peppered moth. Because of the variation, the changes in the different moths, that species was able to survive. The darker moths, thank God there were darker moths, and they were able to camouflage in the darker trees, in the soot of the trees. The lighter moths, got eaten first. Um, and then over time, you had more dark moths and light moths. Okay. Darwin identified factors that affect the process of natural selection. So, overpopulation, variation, competition. Okay. Um, Let me see here. So, it could also be man-made factors, like we talked about again with the moth. Okay. All right. So let's go to do, 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 do. Okay, we're going to try to find figure 6. Okay, here we go. So this is an example of a human issue that caused this monkey flower to change over time. So it says monkey flowers grow successfully in healthy, unpolluted soil. Now, because the soil got polluted and copper was put in the soil, okay, because of, well, pollution, human pollution. So it says copper seeps into the soil around the copper mine, right? So we're mining, and it just, you know, it was originally in this mine, and because of humans needing to mine it for different things, it got out into the soil. So most monkey flowers cannot grow in this polluted soil, and then they begin to die. But hold on, some monkey flowers have genetic variations, and one of those variations allows them to survive and reproduce in copper contaminated soil. So now they start to come back, but the ones that lived are the ones that are able to live in the copper soil. So now we come full circle. And so the picture, we're not going to draw the picture, but if you were going to, it would be this picture right here, flowers again. And then what you would write in the box is that monkey flowers adapted um, to the copper and can now grow in the soil. Okay, so the monkey flower. Okay. And again, because they had that variation in them. Um, and it could kind of make sense because there's copper mine nearby. And so some of them evolved maybe being closer to that or not. And then the winds might blow their seeds over. So maybe those ones that were closer to the mine had that. You have to do more research about how that came to be in them. It could just, or it just could have been some, freak mutation and it just happened to benefit them. So you have to do more research to find out how that variation got in there. Okay, so now we're going to go to assess your understanding 2A and 2B right here. Okay, so a variation is any similarity or difference between individuals of the same species. So a variation is a difference. And then 2B, how do life forms change over time? And so the big overall theme is natural selection. So how do they change over time? Because of the process of natural selection. Um, that is the end of our questions. So what you can do, it's a really good video here. Why don't humans ride zebras? I want you to go back either to the virtual classroom or to um, the hyperdoc. Uh, Click on the link for why don't humans ride zebras? Um, Answer this question: what are two reasons why some animals are easier to domesticate than others? One, two, and then watch the next two videos and write two sentences on how and or why species change over time due to natural selection. We talked a lot about it here, but the video, seeing it in different form, is going to help you. Okay, that's all I have for you here. Have fun with the videos and CG out.